quantum realm, or as it's called in the comic books, the microverse, first appeared all the way back in Captain America Comics number 26 from March 1943, in a story called The Princess in the Atom, where Cap and Bucky travel to a subatomic world known as Mita. This story was actually a knockoff of a science fiction story written by Ray Cummings called The Girl in the Golden Atom. The microverse really properly showed up in the form we commonly know it as in the comics, though, in Fantastic Four number 16. Now in Fantastic Four number 10, a few issues earlier, Dr. Doom tried to bring down the Fantastic Four by using a shrink ray on them that would reduce them to nothingness, but he accidentally got blasted by the ray himself. Instead of shrinking to nothingness, he had entered into a microscopic world, one that he naturally conquered because he's Dr. Doom and he's awesome. With this initial foray into the micro world, stories could now repeatedly be written that would introduce new villains like the Psycho Man. The Silver Surfer took a trip to the microverse to hide from Galactus, who was trying to get his Herald back, and probably one of the most famous microverse stories revolved around the Hulk, who was shrunk down and became king of a microverse world where he met one of his biggest loves, a princess named Jarella. The microverse of the comics is a whole universe with its own planets. This includes Homeworld, which is a chain planet that is home to Calicalac, which is inhabited by insect-like species of Homeworld, and Spartak, which is a rocky world and home to the Acro Years. There is the space wall, which separates the Spiral Path universe from the other dimensions and the rest of the microverse, and then we have a few other places. Mita is a microverse planet which is home to the Mitans, but was destroyed. There's the planet Kai, which is inhabited by these green-skinned people, which is a cool kind of fantasy world, and it's where the Hulk went when he was shrunk down. There's Paradise 3 and then Subatomica, which is where the villain Psycho Man is from, and that has a few key places like Talk, home of the Lizard Men, Tran, which is specifically where Psycho Man was the chief scientist, Merwood, which is where Dr. Doom ended up, and then there's Bazik and Core. Whether these exist in the MCU is another question altogether, but Krylar, who is played by Bill Murray in the upcoming Quantumania, is the governor of a city called Axia inside the quantum realm, so that is a new one. Now it wasn't until 1979 that the microverse was really defined as the microverse. In Micronauts number 1, we are introduced to a bunch of new microverse heroes, including the lead of the book, Commander Rand, who woke up after 1,000 years to help lead a rebellion in the microverse against the evil Baron Karza. This comic book is based on the Mego toy line of the same name, which was, in turn, based on the Japanese toy line Microman. The toy series was about rebels fighting against the evil Baron Karza in the microverse. Now Marvel doesn't own the actual rights to the microverse itself and just the characters that they created. They can continue to make comic book stories with those characters and that location, and every now and again it does indeed pop up in the comics, but when it comes to movies it's a different story, and that's the reason that in the MCU the microverse is now referred to as the quantum realm, which is a name coined by the scientific advisor that worked on the films, who actually pretty much invented everything for this world in the MCU. The microverse or quantum realm actually plays a much more significant role in the MCU than it does in the comic books. But before we jump headfirst into all of that, let's answer the question. Time and space are so different in the MCU's quantum realm that it's basically impossible to comprehend the real world time and location. But when Scott returned back to Earth with the discrepancy of 5 hours versus 5 years, it gave a massive clue to understanding how time differs in the quantum realm, which allowed Bruce Banner, and eventually Tony Stark, to figure out how to map out time through the quantum realm, turning the realm into a time machine. By using time tunnels in the quantum realm, the Avengers were able to go back in time and collect the Infinity Stones needed to undo the snap. But now the question a lot of people are wondering is how this connects to Kang the Conqueror, and why is he in the quantum realm? With the information from Ant-Man and the Avengers, plus things learned in season 1 of Loki, we can make a guess. So all the way back in the 31st century, an Earth scientist named Nathaniel Richards discovered how to travel between alternate worlds. Eventually, so did the variants of him from alternate Earths. While many of them worked together, others didn't want to play ball, and wanted to use this powerful ability to conquer. The opposing viewpoints resulted in an all-out multiversal war that threatened the very existence of everything. That is, until the original Nathaniel ultimately defeated his variants and won the war after he discovered the monster Alioth. Dubbing himself He Who Remains, he used the creature Alioth to guard his secret citadel from which he created the TVA to oversee the sacred timeline composed of the realities collected by He Who Remains, making sure that no realities deviate from the timeline and making sure his other variants are kept at bay. The citadel exists outside of the sacred timeline, aka outside of time and space, in a swirling world of blue and purple color, which sounds and looks a hell of a lot like the quantum realm, a place where the normal rules of time also don't apply. On top of this, and this is where speculation starts to come into play, the quantum realm with its own civilization is almost a perfect place to imprison an enemy who can threaten the sacred timeline for all of infinity. Someone like Kang the Conqueror, for example. A person you'd want to keep close by in order to keep an eye on them and make sure they never escape. Now, part of the TVA's main job was pruning the variants of other individuals in the sacred timeline that break their set timeline, creating an offshoot of the timeline that could threaten it all and lead to another multiversal war. Essentially, this removes free will from individuals who don't even know they're doing anything wrong, which is why Loki and Sylvie, who were set to be removed for breaking the sacred timeline's rules, go against the TVA, going all the way to the citadel of He Who Remains, and then Sylvie kills him. When this happened, He Who Remains assumed it would lead to another multiversal war that played out exactly how it had before, with him being victorious. But that's not what happened. Instead, one of his variants came out on top, and they were now in charge of the TVA, changing the memories of the TVA's workers, but not Loki or Sylvie, as they were outside the sacred timeline when He Who Remains died. Now, if this is true, then the Kang the Conqueror appearing in Quantumania could be this new Nathaniel Richards that won the new multiversal war and is now trying to invade and conquer the other timelines using the quantum realm as his base of operations, with its citizens and civilizations either standing with him as his army or rebelling against the powerful conqueror. What actually is the microverse? The microverse or quantum realm is essentially a whole dimension of its own that can be accessed from our regular old Earth dimension by shrinking ourselves so far down past a certain point that we are forced through an artificially created nexus into the parallel universe. Other sources have said that the microverse exists within atoms themselves, like how in Dr. Seuss the Grinch, the Who's live on a snowflake. This was the case for the very first appearance in Captain America, and while that is a cool idea and seems kind of logical, more often than not its real proper introduction, the realm is described as a parallel dimension. One article I read described it as a Russian doll of universes, and I think that's the best way you can describe it, a world beneath our own. Now, in the MCU, there has actually been a really large amount of mentioning of the quantum realm, and not just in the Ant-Man movies, although Ant-Man is primarily where we find the most real information. It all starts with Hank Pym, who created his Pym particles from subatomic extra-dimensional particles, which allows someone to either shrink or expand their physical body to extreme sizes. Which sounds to me that the Pym particles are quantum in their nature. Hank Pym also spent many years trying to harness the incredible power of quantum energy as part of his time studying the quantum realm. The microscopic dimension became an obsession of his following his wife Janet Van Dyne's disappearance. She went subatomic to stop a nuclear warhead without a way to reverse her shrinking process. That's why he warned Scott Lang repeatedly about messing with his suit's regulator to avoid being lost forever in the quantum realm, a place where, quote, all concepts of time and space become irrelevant. That part is important. But at the end of the first Ant-Man movie, Scott went subatomic anyways to save his daughter Cassie, and he entered the quantum realm, or what I think is that he got as far as you can go before entering the quantum realm. As he shrunk, he passed through smaller and smaller worlds, each beautiful and haunting in its own way. When Scott finally stopped shrinking, he arrived in an empty, dark void dotted with only a few specks of light and all these weird things going on. But his suit is out of juice, so he couldn't go any further. Instead, thanks to his willpower and modifying his suit with the enlarging discs he carried, Scott was able to grow back to where he could return to our world. Now, after Scott's return from where he should have been lost forever, Hank Pym and his daughter Hope Van Dyne built a portal to reach the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Their quantum tunnel made it possible to send someone to a specific coordinate within the quantum quantum realm. Now during the very brief moment they opened the tunnel in their lab, Scott received a message from Janet Van Dyne sent to him from across dimensions. That's because Scott's previous short-lived journey to the subatomic world made him become, quote, quantumly entangled with Janet, meaning their minds shared a direct telepathic connection to one another. So, Janet Van Dyne had indeed survived in the quantum realm for 30 years, and the quantum entanglement was Janet's way of being able to, quote, speak through Scott and share exactly when and where they could find her in the quantum realm. Now another part of that movie is Ava's star, Ghost, who almost ruined their rescue from the quantum realm. A tremendous amount of quantum energy hit a young Ava when her father's own quantum tunnel exploded. That made Ghost quantumly unstable. This chaotic state means that Ava exists in, quote, multiple parallel realities at the same time, allowing her to pass through objects otherwise known as quantum phasing. Also, because of the quantum energy she absorbed, when she focuses hard enough to actually touch things, her kicks and punches hit much harder than someone who is normal. This quantum energy is absorbed by people who are in the quantum realm for long periods of time, and it can grant them abilities. Bill Foster's plan was to fix Ava by stealing all of the quantum energy that is stored within Janet in the quantum realm, but he was a villain, so it wasn't going to work out. Either way, Hank eventually makes it into the quantum realm, initially ending up in the same place Scott did when he shrunk down to save Cassie, but Hank then shrinks even smaller, which takes him to the insanely colorful landscape of the quantum realm. Hank initially began phasing like Ghost does, but Janet, having absorbed so much energy, was able to pass some energy onto Hank and stabilize him with a simple touch. Basically, this shows that the more time someone spends in the quantum realm, the more powerful they become, evolving abilities and powers. When they return back to Earth, Janet could connect to others through her quantum abilities, and she also stabilized Ghost, but not permanently, which is why Scott went into the quantum realm being warned of not getting stuck in a, quote, time vortex. And because of Thanos' snap, he got stuck for 5 years of our time, but 5 hours of his time, leading to the events of Avengers Endgame.
Kang the Conqueror first appeared as a foe to the Avengers in issue number 8 of their first series. He was created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. And boy is he a true Jack Kirby creation if ever I have seen one. He's a lot of a lot, and also, I mean, that character design. Super Jack Kirby in the best of ways. While Kang was seemingly instantly defeated by having a radiation attack bounced back at him, forcing him to flee on his spaceship despite having somewhat of a natural immunity to radiation thanks to being from the future. This wouldn't nearly be the last we'd see of him, and I would say he almost instantly made his mark as an iconic character in that issue. Man, in the future, what do we have to look forward to? Invisible beanbag chairs and apparently some level of radiation immunity. Sounds pretty cool to me if that's our future. Kang the Conqueror is said to hail from the 30th century, believed to be the future or a version of the future of Earth 616. Kang's home reality, however, is known as Earth 6311, sometimes also referred to as Other Earth. Other Earth is a little bit different from the main reality in that there were no dark ages on this world, so that's also why we don't just call it, the future of 616, and honestly, even if we did, we'd probably still give it another number because we never want to be too specific in the comics with what the future really holds. Instead, this alternate Earth skipped the era known as the Dark Ages. Thanks to rapid advancement, they would end up with a colony on the moon, known as Luna, but unfortunately would succumb to war when both the Earth and the moon colony clashed with one another. As a result, the moon would be destroyed entirely, completely obliterated, and its pieces would rain down on Earth, causing massive destruction and leaving the people of planet Earth largely scattered and isolated. Other Earth would also be a world that Reed Richards' father, Nathaniel Richards of Earth 616, would travel to, unite together, and ultimately lead alongside his wife, Cassandra, who hailed herself from Earth 6311, helping Other Earth to recover from a devastating war. Cassandra herself, I believe, is a princess in that future, so, that happens and then you can rule together. However, Cassandra would eventually come to covet the power she held and become known as the villain Warlord, unbeknownst to her husband. But eventually the Fantastic Four would travel to Other Earth and help to defeat Warlord. Years later, Cassandra and Nathaniel's children would rule, truly ushering in an era of peace. As Kang the Conqueror, finally, we're there! He succeeded in conquering this far-flung future, not just the planet, but beyond, building his own galactic empire. However, Kang still found himself thinking back to the past and the modern era of Earth 616, not fully satisfied with what he had accomplished here in the future, future, he set out to become the ruler of Earth 616 as well. It's also believed that his ambition to rule the time period of Earth 616 was also tied to the fact that he'd heard a tale of a celestial Madonna, who would become the mother of the most powerful man in all of known history. Basically, Kang wanted to become the baby daddy of that most powerful figure, which is kind of a weird thought when, like me, you know that the celestial Madonna turned out to be the hero Mantis, and that her baby would grow up to be the half-human, half-Kotati Sequoia, aka Koya, who recently was one of the main villains of the Empire event a few years back. I wonder if there's a future where instead of the Kotati resurrected version of Swordsman being that baby's dad, Kang is his dad instead? I would read that what if it does not yet exist. It was during this time that Nathaniel Richards was born. No, not Reed Richards' father, Nathaniel. His possible future descendant, Nathaniel Richards. Are you confused yet? Although some signs actually point to this Nathaniel, who would become Kang, as a true descendant of Victor Von Doom instead, aka Dr. Doom, the Fantastic Four villain. And others still seem to reconcile both of these records, implying that Nathaniel Richards of Earth 6311 was actually a descendant from both Reed and Victor, somehow. When I say that, I always imagine like a ship of Reed and Victor together and they're like in love, and then somehow Nathaniel's descended from that, but that's not exactly what we mean here, I don't think. When Nathaniel was just a teenager, one of his first other personas entered the chat. This was the person many of us got excited about as potentially existing in the MCU. Iron Lad. Iron Lad is a member of the Young Avengers, acting as the team's version of Iron Man. When Iron Man ends up getting help from a kid named Harley Keener in Iron Man 3, many people believed this could actually be a version of Iron Lad, and we could see Iron Lad in the MCU. And now, with Kang being introduced into the MCU in Quantumania, many believe we could yet see a more comic book adaptation of Iron Lad via Jonathan Majors. Perhaps another alternate version of Kang, where instead Kang becomes the hero known as Iron Lad. This current theory comes from the comics, where Iron Lad, member of the Young Avengers, is later revealed to be a teenage version of Nathaniel Richards of Earth 6311, aka a past version of Kang, before he obviously became Kang. Iron Lad comes to Earth 616 to hide, and hopefully seek help from the Avengers to protect him from his future self, refusing to grow up and become Kang. He's basically looking for a way to avoid that. In fact, Kang the Conqueror would even end up having a comic series with his younger self, Iron Lad, in 2021, titled Kang the Conqueror. Now this 5-issue mini would be all about Kang basically trying to teach his younger self and young Nathaniel wrestling with his own fate and destiny. Kang was basically trying to get him to accept him becoming Kang and like teach him how to be like the best Kang he can be. Kang the Conqueror is often considered to be the prime Kang, while other versions of the character are either Kang from alternate timelines or perhaps divergent versions of the character who split off through time to follow another path and become known by a completely different name, which sounds like an alternate version but it's kind of a little different. I'll touch somewhat on these alternates while trying to keep us mostly focused on the main Kang, Kang the Conqueror. Often known for being an Avengers and Fantastic Four villain, Kang the Conqueror is a villain from the future, who often manipulates the timeline in order to bring his plots to fruition. Himself, being a genius, he is also the kind of villain that can sometimes act as an ally to heroes when a threat is too great for them to handle it alone. Oh, and he's also a man of many chairs. He has a time chair that he literally uses to time travel, and he also has this sweet, floating, invisible beanbag chair because he's from the future. I hope in the future we all get invisible beanbag chairs, and guess what? We do, because this video is brought to you by Float, the new invisible beanbag chair. No, I'm just kidding. I wish though. If you invent an invisible beanbag chair, please sponsor us, because I want one of those. Kang the Conqueror is kind of a weird villain with a very unique look, which I think is why so many are surprised to see him coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and were surprised when he was revealed to be, you know, kind of a villain that we'd be seeing. Initially, I was one of the people that also thought this was an unusual pick for a villain, especially with him appearing as the seeming main antagonist in the Ant-Man and the Wasp film Quantumania. But then I thought thought about it, and I realized just how serious of a threat Kang could be if he weren't reduced to simply being one iteration of the character. Kang is not just a universal threat like Thanos was after all, he is a potential multiversal threat. Fighting Kang is like fighting a one-man time-traveling army that is always multiple steps ahead of you, and also an army that seems to fight within itself and only creates more problems by doing that. And also a villain where anyone, even your closest allies, could secretly be manipulated by, or perhaps even just straight up be, a Kang variant. Now, as soon as I realized that the multiverse was what we were building towards in the next phase, Kang's presence made a lot more sense to me. Multiverse of Madness, What If, Loki, and even to a certain extent I would say WandaVision all seem to be pushing towards this idea of expanding the MCU beyond just the home universe. I mean, even Ms. Marvel kind of gets in on that idea with her being able to access another dimension, or at least, you know, we kind of allude to that, we see that a little bit in that series. With Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, I thought we might be going cosmic when we kind of got that tease where we're talking about where are the rings from, and now I think we're likely going beyond that to other dimensions. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ten Rings were like, I don't know, based in quantum something or doing some other universal stuff that came from another world entirely. This wouldn't be the only version of young Kang that we'd come to know though. In addition to Iron Lad, there is also Kid Immortus, I believe in comic book history, who came into existence following Nathaniel's time as Iron Lad. While Iron Lad made his first appearance in the mid-noughts in Young Avengers issue number 1, Kid Immortus made his first appearance back in 2013 in FF issue number 8, the second FF volume. Not to be confused with the second Fantastic Four volume, which is a different title. So when I'm saying FF, I literally mean the letters FF. And I know that's confusing because FF is often used as a short form when we're talking about the Fantastic Four. But this time around, well, it is also being used in that context in terms of, you know, what the book is about. It's also literally just FF if you're looking to follow up on that series and you're trying to Google it. Even when we aren't directly talking about time travel stuff in Kang's history, it can be confusing to follow. So hopefully you're following along with me here. Let me get my chart. Are you following along all this weirdness? Despite these adventures through time and the attempts young Nathaniel made to avoid ever becoming Kang, he would end up doing just that, becoming Kang. This part of the story, however, hasn't really been documented yet and is a bit of a gap in his history. What we do know is that Kang and other versions of him across time do exist, implying that even after his time as Kid Immortus and Iron Lad, Nathaniel Richards returned to his own timeline and eventually would decide to time travel, although it's unclear if his memories of being either of these younger personas remains with him or not. Eventually, Nathaniel would turn to time travel as a way to apparently alleviate boredom, coming to the ancient past and settling down in Egypt, where he would be known by another name, Ramatut. Nathaniel would indeed become Pharaoh Ramatut, living as a ruler in Egypt until the time-traveling Fantastic Four showed up and stopped him. Because, you know, that's what they do. Following this, Ramatut attempted to return back to his own timeline from there, but he got caught in a time storm along the way, as I guess is warrant to happen when you are time traveling. Admittedly, you know, I don't recall hearing of many other time storms in the history of Marvel Comics, but they must happen, and you know, maybe they're just a little bit more rare. We only hear of them every now and then. I think Wolverine did end up in a time storm once with Puck when they traveled kind of through a picture back to a war-torn 1930s Spain, but you know, other than Kang, I think that's about all I can think of. Let me know in the comments all the time storms you can think of. Oh wait, I actually think my insult of time storms has caused one to head our way. Oh no, hurry, click the like button to save me from being displaced through time. Help! Whew, okay, thanks to those of you who clicked like, that was a close one. And to all of you who did not click like, I want you to know that my life flashed before my eyes. Caught in the time storm, Ramatut ended up displaced in modern day Earth 616. There he met his possible ancestor Dr. Doom and was inspired to give up his Ramatut persona to become more like Doom. Which honestly, fair enough. If I met Dr. Doom, I'd also probably be like, you seem cool, I'm gonna do what you're doing. This was how Nathaniel would go on to become Scarlet Centurion. It was also later revealed that the time storm he was caught in was actually all done by Immortus, yet another time-divergent version of Kang. Apparently, Immortus created time storms to prevent Kang from creating certain alternate reality selves and to stop him from, I guess, you know, like tampering too much with the timeline. Often in comics, Kang's most dangerous enemy tends to be like another version of Kang, and Immortus and Kang have definitely both acted against one another throughout their histories. Scarlet Centurion didn't quite work out for Kang as an identity. He ended up encountering the Avengers in the Avengers 1968 annual, and this would be similar to how his first ever comics appearance would go, in the sense that he would end up being pretty handily defeated here. This prompted him to abandon the Scarlet Centurion look and name and return once more to being Rama-Tut, which, after all, I suppose had been much more successful in comparison, so that makes sense to me. As Rama-Tut, Nathaniel would once more attempt to return home to the future of the 30th century, but alas, more time storms. Rama-Tut goes to check the weather. Dang time storms, time storms, time storms, jeez! All weather channels are forecasting time storms all this week. How am I supposed to travel through time in this terrible weather? This is awful. Also, this weatherman, Immortus, he sure looks familiar to me. Oh well, whoever he is, he certainly is a handsome devil, I'll say that. Once more being tossed up in another time storm, Rama-Tut instead missed his stop in the 30th century, instead being catapulted even further into the future, into the 40th century. There, he discovered primitive beings fighting with sort of past technological weapons they no longer seem to fully understand. At this point, Rama-Tut fancied himself a sort of a master of past tech and weapons and figured, screw it, I could just rule these people. I have the knowledge to do it, so why wouldn't I? And so Nathaniel reinvented himself once more as